Hello, my name is Noah Barth, and today I will be talking about Pigown. Specifically, Percy Pigown's quest to retrieve the Pentaculous Emerald. But before I start talking about that, I have to get you guys up to speed on what is Pigown. What is a Pigown? So, Pigown is a set of stories that I have been coming up with my sister for the past almost 10 years now. And it's mostly stuff that isn't on paper. A lot of it's in Minecraft, as you can see. And some of it is illustrations, like this right here. This is one of the original maps of Pigown. And we kind of took this and built it into Minecraft. So there's like these different kingdoms. There's the Pigowner Kingdom. There's the Pentacular and the Hype Kingdom. And then there's the Suffering Kingdom. Those are like the 4 base kingdoms, but there's a bunch of other ones now. Everything started out as a piece of paper like this, and we ended up making it into something more interactive. But this was a story that I came up with that goes around this universe and brings this universe into a different medium. When it comes to the 4 kingdoms, there are some basic things you need to know. Generally, the Pigowners are the good guys, and then the Hypies and the Pentaculars kind of like negotiate between the Sufferings and the Pigowners, and generally the Sufferings are the bad guys, but there are certain pigs that cross between the boundaries, and there are some pigs that like are very set in their ways. So the first pig that I will be mentioning, the first character, is Percy Pigown. He is kind of like a shy pig, and he is the Prince of Pigown, and his family is like the royal family. And he hasn't really left his house to do a lot of stuff. He hasn't had to do a lot of work in his life. And this is kind of his story on how he kind of matured. The next character that's important is Wirt, W-E-R-T. And he is Percy's horse, which is given to Percy on his 15th birthday. Later, Percy finds out that Wirt can actually speak Pigown, where all of these animals, they have their own language. And the kingdoms do have their own languages, but they usually like to overlap. So then there's Pigown, which is a lot of like a little bit more like, and then there actually are languages set for these kingdoms. Then there is Pentaculus, which is like, then there's Hype, which is, and then there's Suffering, which is like, But Wirt happens to speak the same language as Percy, which is Pigown. So Percy's just staring at him like, because he doesn't know that Wirt can speak. Wirt can speak because he's a horse. He should be able to speak Pigown. Pigown is pig language. So as it turns out, Wirt has been given the gift of speech by Celsius, which is a Pigown goddess in a way. It's the goddess of this story. But she's not really a goddess, but she has certain powers. But she's given him speech and assigned him this quest that she has to help Percy Pigown go on. She has also given Wirt the ability to call on her whenever he needs her help. So then Wirt ends up giving Percy Pigown this map that he has. I think he just had it in his mouth or something. I don't know. He's a horse, okay? And on this map shows the location and how to get to the Pentaculous Emerald. And obviously Percy doesn't want to go because he's in this luxurious life as a pig that is a prince, and he gets to eat all day and whatever. So after a little bit of talking, Wirt ends up convincing Percy that he needs to go because this emerald has a lot of power. Each emerald, there's a couple different emeralds or different gemstones that control different powers in Pigown. So this emerald gives the holder the ability to cast illusions, which can fool other pigs or whatever you want to fool. And you can use this, it's a very strong tool in battle. And if the Sufferings get their hands on this, it could be over for the Pigown Kingdom. I am going to talk about a couple of other emeralds that have existed, or pigs that have gained powers from emeralds, later in this story, but for right now, that's it. Okay, so now Wirt and Percy are on their way out of the Pigown Kingdom. And as they're walking through, they gather the supplies they need. There's lots of marketplaces and different things they can buy, and as well as like a blacksmith and stuff like that. But once they get to the gate, they start having issues. So the pig there works for Percy's dad, the King of Pigown. His name is Sir Lots, aka Dave. He is the guard for the wall between the Pigown Kingdom and the Pentacular Kingdom. And Dave will not let Percy go by. So obviously this is an issue if Percy wants to complete his quest. So what he ends up having to do is he strikes up a deal with Dave that if he goes and collects something for him, Dave will let him through. So this part of the story gets a little bit convoluted, but it's not too crazy. I'll keep it simple. Basically, Percy has to go back through the kingdom, and right next to all the way basically back to where he started, right next to the castle, there is a bar and grill called Facidenos Bar and Grill. It's owned by a pig named Facidenos. And he has a special steak that he makes only for Sir Lots. So inside the bar, there are two pigs, Werder and Fizz. Percy knows that Facidenos will not sell him the steak to Sir Lots because it's meant for Dave only. So he ends up talking to Werder and Fizz to see what he can do. So Werder decides to trick Facidenos into giving him the steak. So what he tells Facidenos is that the king needs a steak for a cooking competition, and he asks Facidenos to prepare his finest steak for them, which is the steak to Sir Lots. And at first Facidenos doesn't believe him until Fizz comes in and delivers the message from the king directly to Facidenos. So at this point Facidenos believes them and then gives them the steak. And then they give the steak to Percy and send him on his way. So right inside of the Pentacular Kingdom, they start seeing things that they've never seen before because they have strict rules what can be sold and what can't be sold and what can be shown and stuff like that. In Pigown, it's a little bit totalitarian, but you know they deal with it, and he's the king or the prince, so it doesn't matter. But as soon as they get through, they see a potion shop, which would be illegal in Pigown, and it's owned by a pig named Mudok and his brother Motley, and they have a bunch of interesting potions of things they might need. So they end up grabbing an invisibility potion and a strength potion. So they get through the rest of the Pentacular realm with absolutely no issue whatsoever because most of the pigs either don't care or they're on their side. So they, when they enter the Hype realm, which is the next realm coming up, there's no gate there because they're all kind of friends there. And as they're walking through, they don't see that there's a massive hole in the road. So this is something that they would know if they were a hypey local, but they don't because they've never been here. So Percy ends up falling in. So Percy's trapped in this hole, and Wirt's up there calling down to him like, Percy, Percy. And Percy doesn't know what he's doing. He's like stuck down there and he's dark and he's scared. And this hole actually belongs to a pig named Julius. And Julius is very odd. He actually lives in this hole, and he decided to dig it in the middle of a big road. Julius agrees to let Percy go on one condition, and that condition is that Percy gives him a Dobby's Chippy. A Dobby's Chippy is a very good chocolate cookie that existed in Pigown. It was made by a pig named Dobby, and he's known for having very floppy ears, but he's very good at cooking things. And somewhat obviously, Percy didn't bring a Dobby's Chippy with him on this quest, because why would you? So Percy Pigown ends up having to use his resourcefulness in order to get out of the situation. So what he does is he gets a piece of mud, which is on the ground everywhere, because it is a pig's wet hole in the ground, because he likes that, and it's cool. He gets a big circular piece of mud, and he gets some pebbles, and he puts them inside, and he ends up making a fake Dobby's Chippy. And this fake Dobby's Chippy is what he gives to Julius. And Julius is like, okay, and lets him out. So this will be more important later in the story. So this is the final hurdle that they have to deal with before they get to the Suffering Kingdom, which is right around the corner from Julius's hole. So as they're going through the gates, they realize that they're not going to be let in. So there's the pig there named Darkwoe. And he has one fatal weakness, is that he can only see straight ahead. He has really big goggles, and he can only see straight ahead. But he is basically the evil version of Sir Lots. So what they end up doing is, in the bushes outside of the Suffering Kingdom wall, they end up finding a couple of old suffering banners, and they cover themselves in these banners. So they arrive at the gate and they do their best suffering impression. They put on the tarp. They're like the banner, and then they're like, yeah, I need to go through. And then he ends up letting them both through. Because he can't see around the banner. He's just like, okay, these guys are good. I've never seen these guys before, but they're good. And then right after that, they take off the banners and they hide in the bushes that are along the streets. And then they travel through, and eventually they reach their destination, which is the Suffering Trench. By this time, they're basically right on where the map shows that the emerald is. They just have to make the descent. They end up finding an abandoned suffering mine, which was used to mine suffering crystals for the first ever Pigown War. By this time, it is pretty decrepit, but they end up making their way down to the bottom of the trench. But when they get there, they see some of the biggest, most scary pigs that they've ever seen. Because of the effects of the invisibility potion, they're able to sneak past these big pigs. And they still don't really know why these big pigs are here, but they end up grabbing the emerald and leaving. As it turns out, the big pigs were actually looking for the emerald as well. So, as they're trying to leave, because of the way the invisibility potion works, whatever they're holding isn't invisible. So these pigs see this emerald that they're looking for just walk by them. So that obviously raises some questions. So, as they're running away from these big pigs, their invisibility effect starts to wear off. Now it's important to mention that they're stuck in this trench, and they've already ran past where the entrance to the mine was. So right now, they can't escape. But if you remember from earlier, with Holius's hole, and remember how they gave Holius the fake Dobby's Chippy? Holius is angry at them now. So he calls in a favor from a friend named Sugwa. And Sugwa is a pig who actually has gotten his hands on another one of these crystals, or another one of these gemstones. And the gemstone that he got gives him the ability to control ice. And he can basically summon ice caves with monsters inside of them, and he can also do a couple other things with ice and snow, and any type of cold element. So now, at this point, Sugwa and his ice caves are forming at the other end of the trench, and they're running straight towards them, and they're getting chased by these big pigs, and they're no longer invisible. So now, it's important to remember that Celsius gave Wart the ability to call upon her from wherever he is. So he decides that this, of any time, is the best time to call upon her. So it takes a few seconds, and they get closer and closer to all meeting in the middle. And then she comes flying down, and then just slams to the ground, disorienting everyone. And she has the ability to do this because she actually was one of the first pig owners to ever get a gemstone. And this gave her flight as well as a couple other powers. So now that all the pigs are knocked down and disoriented, she ends up helping up Wirt and Percy Pigown. And they find that the only way out at this point in time is to go through Sugwa's ice caves. And while they're in the caves, Celsius is outside buying them more time. Okay, so now they're in the caves and they don't really know what to do. They don't really know how to get out. They're just kind of stuck here. But they do know that Sugwa actually lives on the outskirts of the Pigown Kingdom as kind of an exile. So what they have to do is have to find the way to get from this cave to all the way back to the cave that leads to his home. So as they're going through the brisk, deep tunnels, and it's very cold, like it has, and no matter what season it is, when you're in one of these caves, it's unnaturally very, very cold. So as they're going through, they find this one little icicle which happens to glow. So Wirt says, I wonder what'll happen if we touch it. So Percy Pigown is like, okay, I don't really know what else to do. So they go over, and he goes over and touches it with his hoof. And then all around them, the icicles start glowing. And then they notice up ahead in the fork in the cave, the glowing icicles go one direction. So they decide, well, maybe that's the way we should go. So after quite a lot of trekking, they end up going through, and they end up in the mining district in the mountains of Pigown. After a bit more walking, they end up back home. And this is basically how the story ends for these guys. But in a way, it kind of is the start of the story for Percy. And in a lot of ways, Percy has changed in his ability to go on quests and go out and be adventurous. And also, others' perception of him changes because he's done this big, great thing, which has saved the sufferings from potentially getting something that could end the Pigown Kingdom. All right, I'm Noah Barth, and this is my tale. Thank you for listening to the whole thing and getting to the end. A lot of this has came from me and my sister and stuff that we worked on, but this whole story, it kind of, parts of it existed, but overall, the linearness of it came through me. And I am really just including a lot of big things that are pronounced in Pigown and things that I thought were interesting and wanted to share in this type of story.